Hello, my guest today is Bert Rosenblatt, who is the managing principal of the New York City office of the Cresa commercial real estate brokerage and advisory firm. Cresa has over 80 offices worldwide, and Cresa's New York City office represents a wide range of industries, including technology, media, communications, data, nonprofit, law, and more. Bert has been working in the New York City commercial real estate market for over 25 years. Bert and his team help business owners and not-for-profit entities find suitable space that fulfills their business needs by providing expertise and experience, assessing market conditions, and providing location strategies, project management, and building technology solutions. Welcome, Bert.
Thanks for having me, Stephen.
Great to catch up with you, Bert. So before we get into our discussion about the New York City 2023 and 24 commercial real estate market trends and your predictions for the future, can you just tell us a little more about the services that Cresa provides and why a business owner looking for office space would want to hire Cresa or maybe some of the other services?
Sure. I think the most important thing to understand about Cresa, and you as a lawyer can, fully appreciate this, is they have no conflicts of interest. So Cresa is about 1,000 people, and we are the largest tenant rep only commercial real estate firm in the world. So what that means is that we don't represent landlords. So if you take a market like Manhattan, right? Manhattan has 500 million square feet of commercial office space. There's 15 to 20 landlords that control 75 to 80% of that total square footage, right? So if you're representing, you know, five of them or three of them, right, you're representing 50 or 100 million square feet of office space. And then if you're representing the landlord and you're representing the tenant, which obviously you can't do in the law, but is perfectly legal to do, at least in the US, in commercial real estate, then you're deeply conflicted because you're getting paid by the landlord. You're also representing the landlord. And if you represent the Empire State Building, even if you represent LinkedIn or Microsoft, right, the Empire State Building is going to spit out more fees, year over year, than a big tenant like Microsoft or LinkedIn, which is going to do one deal for 15 or 20 years, and that's it. So that's really the sort of the main differentiator between us and, our larger competitors.
Understood. So can you just provide that? I understand what the sort of different, how you're different, how Crest is different. But what are some? Just give us like some like real world examples of what the actual services you'd be providing. Let's say a client.
Sure, yeah, no problem. So I just represented the Consulate of Portugal, and so that's like a real world example. So they came to me. They were actually in a commercial condo on Second Avenue in the 40s, and as probably many of your listeners know, people like Portugal. They want to go to Portugal. Portugal's having a moment, right? So the consulate, a lot of people are, interested in becoming Portuguese citizens, right? That a lot of this happened during COVID. So the bottom line was the mission was growing and the consulate was growing, and the mission was kicking the consulate out. So the consulate ended up needing to find space. They hired me and my firm, and what we did was we did a full survey. Obviously, they needed to be near the UN. Like a lot of these foreign governments. So, we looked at a bunch of buildings on Third Avenue. We took three buildings that they really liked, and then we let them fight over the consulate, right, submitting offers back and forth, did spreadsheet analysis for them, and then when they chose a landlord, then worked very closely with their attorney to make sure the lease was finalized. And then the other big piece of it is the work, right? We worked with their designers, their project management team, their they had people in Lisbon that were, had specifications that were very specific to a consulate, reinforced walls, some bulletproof glass, things like that, that needed to get incorporated into the design. So I think the easiest way to explain it, Stephen, is we're sort of the conductor for this kind of, project. Does that make sense? And that's a typical project.
Right. Yeah, that completely makes sense. That's a great story. Any other sort of success stories or sort of let's say more out of the box um deals that you worked on recently or that you want to, share just to give our viewers some more interesting
Sure. Yeah, we
information?
really like out of the box stuff, and I know you probably have people that are doing, national work. So we do a lot of school work. So we do a lot of private school work, and then we also do a lot of charter school work. So we're working with a very well-known private high school, and a lot of these in Manhattan, a lot of these private high schools in New York City are looking at South Florida because there's been such a migration, right? There's so many people of substance that have moved down to South Florida in the last 3 or 4 years, and the school system down there is just not what, New York's private school system is. So it's a bit of a gold rush down there, which is really the opposite of what's happening in the office leasing market, which is very soft in Manhattan, as most people know, because the work from home thing is just still, very much an issue. But so we located a 61-acre parcel of land down there and then teed up a developer that is going to be the development partner and the operating partner for the school. And we're putting together the entire deal, soup to nuts. So, they wanted to be in a specific area of Orlando, based on, just their due diligence, like as an organization. And, we identified a site that they really liked, and, now we're executing on the project. Does that give you a flavor for something that's a little more out of the box?
Yeah, no, that's super interesting. That's not definitely not a cookie cutter deal there. So what are some misconceptions or things that people should know about if they're looking for office space and let's say they're retaining your firm, like what?
I mean, I think that it's very similar, candidly, to the law, um, in that, look, I do think that the differentiation between, a full service firm that does landlord and tenant work and an exclusive tenant rep firm really is meaningful, particularly when you're working on deals with tenants, because again, as a broker in the US, you're getting paid by the landlord, and you want to really be able to say with confidence that you're the tenant's unwavering advocate, that there's nothing, conflicting going on. So that is, I think, as like a firm-wide initiative that's been really positive about Cresa, and they've been that way since their inception in 1990. But I think that the most important thing is that you just have a good feeling with the person that you're working with. And so in that sense, it's very similar to your lawyer. Like, I owned my own firm before Cresa bought us for many years. And, I had a lawyer such as yourself that was basically my inside outside counsel. He was essentially my consigliere, and I really trusted him, and we were in foxholes together. And, different things happened over, 16 and a half years of running a small business that, happens to every business owner, and you need a good lawyer. And so I would just argue that, the same really can be said for your commercial real estate broker. You want to be um, you know, clear that this is the person that you're dealing with, that it's not a bait and switch, that it's like the person that comes in and actually pitches the work, to win the project is the person that you're dealing with, and then that person is experienced and understands the landscape of the business. But I think that, the most important thing, like in any kind of trusted advisor relationship, which is law, commercial real estate, many others, accounting, is trust, right? So you really have to trust the person that you're dealing with and make sure that there's a comfort level, and that that person has your best interests at heart.
Sure.
That
Yeah, that's definitely a good differentiation there. So logistically, let's discuss, let's say a business owner wants to retain Cresa and work with your team. How do they get that process started, and what's Cresa's fee structure, and then, is it typical, for the industry, or, what's your take on that?
Yeah, yeah. So the fees are set, right? They're the same with any firm. And the tenant does not pay the fee. So really the only thing that my team here at Cresa needs to get going on a project is to send an engagement letter to our client. An engagement letter is essentially a one-page document that says um, that we will be representing you, right, on a one-to-one basis for a certain period of time, and that we have the ability to tell prospective landlords that we're working with you and to give them basic information, like essentially your website. I mean, we can sign NDAs if we have to get into, financial information, which ultimately is going to have to be disclosed, but that's further down the line. And that's really a pretty standard document in the industry.
Right.
And I always give my clients like an out, like I don't want them to feel like they are in a loveless marriage, as
Right.
it were, right? So I do think that everybody knows about the same space. And so, working with 3 or 4 brokers on the same project is really not helpful for the tenant, forgetting about the broker. The reality is that experienced brokers that know what they're doing really are not going to work that way. They want to work on a one-to-one basis with their clients because, they want to be able to look at the entire market. And then just like we did with the Consulate of Portugal, they want to be able to run a process where, if a broker is good at his job, particularly his or her job, particularly in this environment, which is, the market's very soft, and you want to be in a particular area, like Stephen, you're in Midtown East, right? Like near the UN. You shouldn't have to look at more than 10 buildings, right? And those buildings, every one that you look at, like should be fully vetted. You're a law firm, so they should be built law firm space that's in good condition, in quality buildings, and then you take your top 3 and you submit simultaneous offers on them, right? So it's what you're really getting is you're really getting an intermediary that can run interference for you and essentially show you where each landlord's bottom is, and then you choose, right? Generally after going back 3 or 4 times on these deals, you find where each landlord's bottom is, and then it's really up to the tenant to make a decision as to what direction they want to go in. And that's really the way that you should work with a commercial real estate broker, whether it's us or anyone else.
Understood. So can you provide our audience with a high level recap of sort of the New York City leasing market, let's say, pre-pandemic to present? And we'll talk about the future in a moment, but just sort of like what's been the trend? Obviously, it's taken a hit, but just last few years, what have you seen?
Yeah, so I think the easiest way to describe it is, so 2019, again, there's 500 million square feet of office space, commercial office space in Manhattan. In 2019, there was about 40 million square feet of leasing. Okay, that's a healthy market, 40 million square feet. The vacancy rate was at about 7 or 8%. The vacancy rate is a moving target because every firm has their own research department and they vary somewhat. But basically it was about 7 or 8%, which is sort of an equilibrium, right? When it gets down to like 5%, it really, really gets tight and it's very, very hard to negotiate anything. You're just lucky to get a deal done, right? At any price, basically, because in that environment, you have like several tenants that are stacked up on every halfway decent space. So it's like almost every deal is like a bidding war, which is terrible for tenants. In this environment now, flash forward, the vacancy rate's at 20%, right? So the vacancy rate's more than doubled. There are some areas like downtown Manhattan and the Garment Center where the vacancy rate's probably closer to 30. There's also an issue out there in the market called shadow space, which is basically that landlords have so much space available that they're not listing certain spaces, right? So the vacancy rate as a whole may actually be a little bit higher than 20%. So what's happened is you have a couple of factors. One is you have, publicly held landlords whose stock prices has just absolutely been hammered. And, that's just can be well documented. I mean, these stock prices have gone down to like a hat size, so it's like $5 a share, $7 a share, really scary territory. And they are just looking to prop up their vacancy rates. So like what they want to do is they want to say, okay, well, the vacancy rate's 20%, but mine's 10%. And the reason I'm telling you that is that could be an amazing opportunity for tenants, because what I'm seeing with these publicly held landlords is that they will, and I'll give you a real world example. I just did a deal with a law firm, probably about your size, Stephen, and we closed a deal at the end of last year. And the landlord built the space for them. They spent $150 a foot building it out, right? Then they furnished it for them with Knoll Furniture, which is, one of the best, lines of office furniture, which, believe it or not, is, $35 to $40 a foot. Then they gave my client, it was only a 5-year lease, 6 months of free rent, right? Then on top of that, they're building an additional office for them, right? Which is costing them another $25 a foot. So this isn't a math class, but the bottom line is when you add all that up, you're at close to $250 a foot, okay? The rent was $54 a foot, right? $54 a foot times 5 is about 250, right? So what I'm trying to tell you is that this landlord is not making any money on this deal. And then they had to pay me a commission, and then they had to pay the agency broker a commission. Why did they do the deal? They did the deal because it was the end of the year and they wanted to prop up their vacancy rate. They wanted to increase their occupancy rates, right? So they're just incredible opportunities out there, which I've never seen before in my entire career. And this is a landlord that historically has been very, very difficult, right? So it's just it's really an incredible buying opportunity if you actually need office space.
Okay, that's it. That's very interesting. So what about the future? Where do you see? I mean, I think 2024 is there's a lot of uncertainty for sure, but where do you think it's going to be in relation, let's say, in relation to 2023 or
So 2023 ended and law firms bailed us out of so just to give you a sense of it, so we did about 20 million square feet of leasing last year, right? So that we're about halfway back. That's the way I think you should view it from 2019, right? We were at 40 million. The problem, Stephen, is it's kind of like the boat that has a leak in it, and you keep bailing the boat out, right, with a bucket and the water, and you keep putting it back into the lake, but there it keeps taking on more water. So what's happening is, these leases are rolling every year, right? And so if you look at like in 2022, the biggest deal of the year was KPMG, right? So KPMG, the accounting firm, they had about 800,000 feet in Midtown. They moved to Hudson Yards, right? And they took about 500,000 feet, which is an enormous amount of space. I mean, to put that in context, that's like, a little more than half of your entire office building, and you're in a big office building, Stephen. So, you know, it's a big deal, a huge deal. But the problem is they took less space, right? And that's the problem, right? So last year, some really big name law firms, one in particular, took an additional 250,000 square feet. And everybody started cheering, like, oh, we're reversing the trend. But honestly, I think it's a little bit of an anomaly. What I'm generally seeing is when these big leases come due, they're taking space, but they're taking smaller space. So the problem is you have bigger tenants that are still big, but taking smaller space incrementally. And then you don't have the tech firms doing anything, right? So like in the last financial crisis, 08, 09, pre 08, 09, we didn't have, big, users like Google and Amazon and Facebook in Manhattan. We just didn't, I mean, they were really pretty small. Facebook has over 2 million square feet in Manhattan now, but they're not growing, they're shrinking, they're subleasing their space. Google owns, entire buildings in Manhattan, but they're not taking more space, right? Amazon is not taking more space. Now, maybe that trend reverses, but the only groups that are really kind of moving the dial now are the big private equities like KKR and things like that, and then the big law firms. It's not enough. So I think that something's got to happen. There've got to be other businesses that bail us out besides like big law and big finance. And I think that New York's going to recover. It's very resilient, but I think it's going to take a while. I mean, I think it could potentially take another 5 years to get back to where we were in 2019.
Right. So you think like for 2024, it's basically things are the same, or maybe a slight uptick, or just sort of it's going to be it's like a basically
Hmm.
level for the next few years and slowly upticking, or where do you think?
Excuse me. My gut, my gut is that the market bottomed in the summer of last year, and then it's kind of flatlining.
Right.
And that it's going to continue to be pretty flat until the end of this year. So I don't think anything's going to happen particularly quickly. The one caveat is that the A plus buildings, like there's a building right near your office, One Vanderbilt, which is widely considered the best office building in Manhattan. It's owned by SL Green. That building is 100% leased.
Right.
And at really big numbers. They did a deal in that building for over $300 a foot,
Wow.
which was the highest recorded rent for a commercial office tenant ever in Manhattan. I think it was like $322 a foot. Now, it was a small deal. It was 10,000 feet at the very, very top of the building, and it had special, super high ceilings, and it was a special space. But, in this awful market, you have the highest rent ever recorded. So that's the dichotomy, right? Is you have most of the market is sucking wind, and then you have like what I would call the super luxury market,
Right.
that's actually doing really well. But I do think that in general, the market's going to struggle for the next year or so. The only bright spot is, like there is AI, right? AI was the story of 2023, and like OpenAI is looking for, about 100,000 square feet in Manhattan, right? What does that mean? Does that mean more AI related businesses? Well, that's what we need, Stephen, right? We need other industries to bail us out. It can't be law and finance, and advertising's been shrinking. It's got to be like these open AI, related businesses that kind of get us back to where we were in 2019.
Right. Right. Understood. So, um, moving away from sort of real estate stuff, are there any sort of, unique or interesting hobbies, or, charitable organizations that you work with that our viewers might find interesting? You want to give a plug to, or talk about yourself a bit
Um,
more?
sure. On the charity side, I've had a long time involvement with Leadership Enterprise for a Diverse America, which is an amazing organization which basically takes really smart kids from socioeconomically disadvantaged backgrounds to Princeton between their junior and senior year of high school, gives them the best tutoring and teaching at Princeton that money can buy over several weeks. And then many of these kids, they're already rock stars. These are going to be like, some kid that's going to be the valedictorian of his class, but he may be first generation, and he doesn't think, he thinks he's going to go to the local community college. And then they're like, no, you can apply to Princeton and get into Princeton. And, so they sort of give them the training, but they also, give them like a lot of resources and, support. And the results are just crazy. I mean, like any high school in America would just be salivating all over. Like they have 100 scholars a year. They get like 18 of them into Princeton, 10 of them into Harvard. I mean,
Oh, wow.
it's just nuts.
And
And
and that's a New York City based organization, or is it
it's New
nationwide?
York City based, but it's a national organization.
Right.
They primarily get the word out through the high school guidance counselors. But I'd be happy, people can email me if they're interested and want to get involved in it. I'd be happy to connect them to the executive
Great,
director.
great.
And
Thanks for
then
sharing.
on the hobby side, I'm a swimmer and a squash player,
Oh, wow.
which is I guess kind of boring. But the other hobby that I have is I love old movies. So for those of you that remember, now with streaming, it's all gone. But I would call myself like a TCM dork, which was Turner Classic Movie Channel. And I love watching old movies. Sometimes I'm even lucky enough to convince my wife to watch one with me.
Great. Thanks for sharing it. So if our viewers want to contact you, Bert, what's the best way to reach you?
I always give people my cell phone, which I know people think's unusual, but I just like to be different and available. So my cell is 917-862-8820, 917-862-8820. They can text me, they can call me, they can call me on the weekend, they can call me at night. I'll pick up if I can. And then they can always email me at brosenblatt, BROSENBLATT at Cresa, CRESA.com.
Oh, great. All right. Thanks so much, Bert. It was great catching up with you, and I appreciate you spending some time with me and our audience. Thanks.
Thanks for the opportunity.
All right. Take
Thank you
care.
for tuning in. If you enjoyed this content, please click like and subscribe. And remember to make every day great.